just thought I'd like to start by saying thanks for having us as the Bakers. We've been, we've been feeling fairly welcomed over the last, 3 months, I suppose it's been. Is it 3 months? Maybe not quite 3 months. But thanks anyway. We've hoped to stay on for a little bit and enjoy ourselves with you guys. I wanted to, you'll have to excuse me too if I have to put my glasses on. I'm not trying to be cool or anything, but they've got readers in the bottom and my eyes are, unfortunately, as I'm getting old, fading. So, in Luke chapter 8, it says in verse 16, no one, when he has lit a lamp, covers it with a vessel or puts it under a bed, but sets it on a lampstand that those who enter may see the light. For nothing is secret that will not be revealed, nor anything hidden that will not be known and come to light. Therefore take heed how you hear. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and whoever does not have, even what he seems to have will be taken from him. I might just pray quickly. Lord, thanks for these people and thanks for your word, and pray that you may bless it to people, whoever hears it. And thank you that I've got a story, and pray that everybody else has got a story as well, that they may share it. I remember doing a night exercise in the army. I was in the army for a little while, and from about 11 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the morning, we had to navigate. You could use your small torch every now and then, and we had to navigate through rain and mountains, and it was near impossible in the dark to be the leader of your men. I happened to be on scout, which a scout is the guy that goes out in front and tries to find his way and preventing anybody catching you as well. So in pitch black, we navigated from about 2 o'clock in the morning, from about 11 o'clock at night till about 2 o'clock in the morning. And then in the rain, we put our little hoochies, which is a little cover over our heads, and went to sleep in the rain. And in the morning, we got up in our, what you call an LUP, or our lay-up point, to talk about what had happened. It's irrelevant, but I often think about that exercise, because could you imagine if you didn't have to be in the dark and you, scout we often had to be on cobweb patrol, because you would pick up every spider and spider web on the way as you were navigating through the bush. Could you imagine getting to the end of that and you didn't have a torch and you had to navigate and you had to lead all your men through, and then at the end of that you said, hey fellas, look at this. And you hold up a torch. And all of you could have just walked through the bush, and it wasn't an army exercise, and you could have seen where you were going and you didn't have to trip over things. You'd be fairly heavily ridiculed. So I've got a story, and that is that I'm a Christian, and I'm a saved Christian, and I need to be able to share that, and I need to be able to have that as a story that's consistent, and that story needs to be able to be shared with people of my army past, people of my steel fabrication, customers, family, churchgoers, and it needs to be consistent. And I thought I'd start by saying, what is a testimony? I've been asked to give a gospel testimony, and this is not what I do. I'm not a preacher, and I'm not a person that gets up the front very often. But a testimony needs to be consistent, and it needs to be something that is... it's an account of me. And if you hold your testimony in a court, then it needs to be accurate. So this is my testimony. That's what a testimony is. Now, if I'm a Christian, what is a Christian? And I think it's fairly important that I now define what a testimony is. What's a Christian? Now, there's supposedly about 2.4 billion Christians in the world. And they're largely divided by Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox. George might be able to tell you a bit about them. And Christians. Now, I'm lucky enough to employ only a little bit more than 50 people, and I'm fairly busy at work, and I've also got a number of people that work for me offshore making things. And I'll often ask when I'm about to employ somebody, what are you? Are you a Christian? Are you anything? Are you religious? Are you healthy? So one, they consider their health, and two, they answer as to whether they are something or not. Now, a lot of people don't want to talk about religion, but when you're asked whether you're something or not, you either need to own up and own it, or you need to say that you're nothing. And I think you need to be considering yourself. Are you a something or are you a nothing? And sometimes people will say, I'm an Orthodox, or I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Buddhist, or I'm a Sikh, or a Hindu, or a Catholic. And often I'll say, what's a Catholic? And they'll say, well, the most common response that I get for somebody is, well, I was brought up that way, and I'm not all churchy and stuff. I'm just a Catholic, and I'm yet in 30 years to have an answer that I can hold credible as something that I would want to be like, or am more intrigued by it. Now, I'm sure I could get a good explanation for it, but I'm yet to have that. Now, as a Christian, sometimes I say, what's a Christian? And I think it's important that I need to define that I'm not a Catholic. I'm a Christian. I'm a born-again Christian. I'm a non-denominational Christian. I'm a believer in Jesus and that he saved me and that he washed my sins away, and I believe that I am a sinner, and that's reason for my life. And whether it be a large or a small sin, he's washed it away for me, and I'm no longer accountable for it because I'm forgiven. And there's been times where I've had people that I've interviewed and they've given me that answer, and you just about want to hug them because it's pretty cool. Like, for someone to give you a bullseye is pretty rare. If I'm going to split the 2.5 billion Christians in half, I think I'm safe enough to step out with George also that the Orthodox and the Catholics are believing that they need to go to Mary for Mary to present you to Jesus, or you need to go to a man and present your sins to a man. And if you know yourself, and if you're anything like me, you know that all men, in some level, are sinful and needing forgiveness. So if you can't take Jesus as the forgiver and go direct to him, then you're going to men and you're going to Mary. And I'm not here for a slinging match at the Catholic Church, but I need to be careful if people are to hear my message that I don't tell them that I'm a Christian and they also think that I'm a Catholic, because I'm not. I was born into a family, 2 sisters. We were part of the exclusive brethren, and I'm actually quite proud to say that I was. They're recorded as being a fairly, sometimes called cult-like, sometimes called overly judgmental religion, but they're Christians and they believe in Jesus. And my parents and myself were in that for quite a long time. I was less so, but when I was young we were in it and we went to meetings a lot, and we had lots of cousins, and Mum was a family of 5, Dad was a family of 7. There was going to be lots of people to hang out with. Mum and Dad stepped left over a menial thing that wasn't sinful and were kicked out. So we subsequently had now no more family of sorts, and Mum and Dad copped it. Just prior to being kicked out, Dad was diagnosed with cancer and he was given 3 months to live. So lots of people praying for him, and Mum begging him to, begging God to give Dad 15 years so I would know him. He's now still here, 45 years. And the prayer of, see, I'm just having a bit of a magnum moment. I thought I couldn't call it a marshmallow moment. So I was sitting down the back there and I was thinking, if I have one of these marshmallow moments, I've got to call it something different. So I've decided that it's a magnum moment. It's hard on the outside, so I might come across that way. It's better if kept cool, but it's liable to melt. So I'm trying not to melt, all right? So anyway, Dad's now better. A lot of prayer from a lot of exclusives, and a lot of other Christians. Dad's better, and we're now out. Mum's got kids that want to play on a Sunday, and we're not going to church. They want to get in, so they come to a church, and it's Dandenong Gospel Chapel. Would you believe? 40 years ago. So the 40 years ago, they were here for a bit, and for some reasons ended up at Oakley Gospel Chapel, and then back here again, and I was baptised here at, I think perhaps 8 or 9 years old, hearing the messages, hearing the Gospels, knowing that I needed to be saved. It was important to me that I felt that I needed to be saved, and it was here. So that's quite ironic that we're back, and these boys down the back have thrown me in the deep end on week 4 or 5 or whatever it is, but here I am. So for family reasons and a marriage coming, we went to Bayswater Gospel Chapel for a while, and I had my doubts as to whether I was saved. So if you've got your doubts as to whether you are saved, then you need to be sure. And there was a fellow by the name of Peter Brandon, and he showed me Romans 10 verse 9, which says if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. You might be saved. It doesn't say you might be saved. And he stressed that to me and gave me the confidence to know that it's an assurance that God has given us. And for as long as you believe that you are in need, God will give you an assurance via his word. So there was a few other verses. The gentlemen here have asked me to give them a gospel message as well as a testimony. And one of the things as a Christian or as a non-Christian, some people will say that if I follow the 10 Commandments, then as long as I'm good, maybe I can be okay before God, or I don't think that there's such thing as sin. If we recognise that there is sin, and if you go through the commandments, which I won't read them now, but if you go through the commandments, it doesn't take you long to realise that you're not perfect, and on any level of imperfection, we need to consider, if our days were to end, would we be ready? And if you can recognise that you aren't perfect, then you can recognise that also God is perfect. And if he is a perfect God, then he shouldn't let a little bit of sin in. He should be completely free of sin. So the only way to be completely free of sin is to have it forgiven. And Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. It makes me a sinner, if I'm honest. None are without sin, no, not one. Am I a big sinner? It really doesn't matter. So it's nice to be forgiven. And when you're forgiven, I guess as Christians we believe that Jesus will return to take us someday to heaven, but that might not happen in our lifetime. So that means that you need to be ready if something happens to you and you die suddenly, or if you're sick, that you're not going to be too upset when it comes to meeting with God on the other side, if you believe in God. And Hebrews 9:27 says, just as people are destined to die once, but after that to face judgment. But there's a way. John 14:6, I am the way, the truth and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. So it's a fool's forgiveness if you think that you can be forgiven any other way but through Jesus. So if you think that you've got your forgiveness through men, if you think you've got your forgiveness through works, take care that you're happy with that decision, because you're using your fellow man or your works, which aren't going to be good enough, to try and get you into heaven. And then you have Matthew 7:21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then, this is God talking, I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. And that's frightening stuff. So it's important to know what you believe and to be sure that it's right. And then you also need to be sure that you can't be unsaved. Once you've committed your life to Jesus and asked him into your heart, you can't be unsaved. You're saved forever. I used to go as a kid, I'd go into mum and dad's room to see if they were still there, because I thought that maybe Jesus would come and I'd be left behind. And it's not a good way to run to your mum and dad's room and expect them to be gone, but it's also nice to know that there's something within you that you know that you have got. If you buy a ticket to a movie and you stick it in your pocket, you might keep checking your pocket as to whether the ticket's in there, but you bought it and you know it's in there. You don't check it because it's not there. You don't check it because you didn't buy it. It's there. You've got it. And salvation is not something that you can lose. For God so, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but will have eternal life. And God is not slack in 2 Peter 3 verse 9. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering towards us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. You wonder what the world is doing. There's wars, there's buildings falling over, there's a lot of stuff happening. They're little reminders that it won't go forever and you need to be ready. Jesus said to them, surely I say to you, today you will be in paradise, with me in paradise. If that's today, are you ready? So I was baptised from birth also, which was into the exclusives, and dedicated by my parents to the Lord. And there's a lot of stories where People were Christians, brought up that way, let it all go, rebelled against God, and then suddenly came good again. And it's the story of, if I wasn't brought up bad, then if I wasn't brought up as a Christian, then it was a good thing for me, but I fell away, and I don't have that story, which I'm very thankful for. I wouldn't say that I've been the best of people, and I don't think anybody has. And the foundation that was put into me as an upbringing, brought up in a Christian family, there's things to be bitter about. I was brought up looking at my grandparents through a fly screen door. They wouldn't see me because they didn't want to be seen seeing me, but they were out of the exclusives and they couldn't get back in again. Madness stuff. But the exclusives sowed a fear of God into my parents. They were good, and they're still saved. They're saved in a different way. Lucy got saved in Crossways Church while we were in a gospel chapel, and God works in all denominations to get his will done. And if they're not against us, then they're for us. So we should work together to try and grow that and cultivate that as common-minded Christians. I'm getting there, sorry, won't be long. As a kid, I was wanting to get into the Air Force and didn't, because I'd chosen all the wrong subjects, so I was a bit dejected. And one day, little slacker said to Dad, "I'm a bit sick of school, Dad," on the way home from the farm. And he said, "Why don't you want to be a welder?" So that the next day I found out what a boilermaker was, and I was in my first day of my apprenticeship. A bit of a shock. 6 months later I was up to my eyeballs, and the other kids were finishing school, and I've probably taken boilermaker about as far as you can, but I was then suddenly exposed to men in every different nature, and they were advising me of the things that I should do in the world. And it was only because of the foundation that I've had with good parents that I was able to hold my own. I got the Apprentice of the Year for all of the years that I did trade school, and then got selected to go and work in Japan for doing heavy fabrication. I went and did heavy fabrication over there, and suddenly I was with two other guys that were doing drugs in the same house. And again, through good upbringing, we had a lot of fun, and it was a family and a fear of God that I didn't take my family there, but I took God there. So I came back, worked and managed around a few other factories around Melbourne, and got an early release from my apprenticeship, because I went during my apprenticeship to Japan, but I got an early release and got paid as a tradesman in Japan. So that was a pretty good start. After managing a few shops around Melbourne, I started my own business, and that's 27 years ago. I'm still doing it now. In parallel to that, I joined 2 Commando, which is the Australian Army Special Forces, and did, I'm not quite sure the amount of time, but it was nothing to brag about, but it was good fun. But I wasn't probably there for long enough to call myself a hardy, robust soldier like these Ukrainian boys or anything like that, but I can safely say that I've been yelled at by the best of them, and learnt quite a lot of stuff with these guys. In parallel to that, I got what's called T-cell mycosis lymphoma, which is a cancer. So the combination of those things saw me get out of the army, and I probably didn't need to be that slack. I probably could have kept doing that, but when I look back at it now, I've been drawing off what I learnt in the army pretty much my whole life. And it gives you something, I think. Whether it was only a little bit, it still was a lot. And I got better from the cancer and kept on with my business, which was good. So God's really looked after me by lots of different things that have happened to me. I've come off motorbikes in every direction. I've hit cars. I've been hit by cars. I've been run over by cars. I've been hit by a boat. I've been nearly run over by a ship. Car accidents, car accident rollovers. My cousin and I were having sword fights with army helmets on when we were kids, about Freddie's age, and had a big rollover, and Mum broke her back. We climbed out the boot of the car, and the roof was down on the seatbelt. And I can still hear Mum now saying, "Lord save us," and she's a stickler for a seatbelt. But she had, would have had to have had her seatbelt undone. She still is adamant now that God undid her seatbelt. But we ended up upside down against a fence post, and the fence post was against a dam, so the dam was there. So God won't let you die. He won't let you die unless you're ready. Unless he's ready, But you don't know when that is. As far as industry, from things falling over, close calls that could have killed, blinded me, explosions, whatever it is, it's something that a lot of people haven't had, but it's something that gives a bloke appreciation of what God has as a purpose for you. What's his purpose for you? I did pretty much whatever I wanted to do as a young bloke at fairly high speed, but was also quite a good church attendee. My ex-exclusive friends, Christian friends, we used to go out together, and sometimes we were bad company for each other, but we tried to look out for each other and be half-wise in our liberties. And there's plenty of embarrassment, regret or embarrassment that could be tabled regarding, my past, I guess. But I guess being around Christian friends gave me half a chance to be looked after. And we still now talk about it, our friends, and say when we were loose, God stopped it. And we can talk about times when God stopped it. And when we were feeling a little bit more encouraged, sometimes liberties would come our way and we would be mature enough to say no. It's not saying that we were good all the time. And then a busy, selfish 26-year-old found a lovely Christian Lucy, magnum moment. She was 19 and I was 26, and we were married a few years later. And after 3 miscarriages, and we've got now 3 kids, which are good. We seem to like them. Yeah. And that's why the first one's called Pearl, because they take a little while to make. Yeah. And it's 20 years on Wednesday, by the way, for our anniversary, so there you go. So, look, we've had a good marriage and we're very thankful for it, and if I could say anything, it's when God has been put first that it's been the best. And we've seen people pass. Lucy's mum, my sister, also died of cancer, and her daughter that died of cancer prior to that. So God, you must also understand that no one would die if God answered every prayer, because we'd pray them all into heaven and they'd all still be around. God is the wonderful adjuster of life and time, and he knows best. So you need to make the most of the people while you've got them here. So no matter what happens, there's a few things there with near calls, but no matter what happens, whether it be business or health, unfortunate circumstances, God has everything to perfection, and you can't lose your salvation. He can't take that from me. And I'm ready, and I'd be encouraged if you could also say in your next job interview, what are you? That you could say, I'm a Christian, and then be ready for them to say, what's a Christian? Because you must be able to back it up. And of the naysayers of the world, Lucy and I make a bit of a chuckle that People say, "Oh, life will get hard. Wait till you get a girlfriend. You've got to look after her. Or wait till you get married and you've got life. Wait till you have a kid. Or wait till you have 2 kids. Wait till you have 3 kids. Or wait till you're old. Wait till they have kids." We need to make the most of what comes, and make the most of that coming every day. And just a few verses that have been an encouragement for me. Don't entertain a fool according to his folly. You are who you hang out with. So take a view of who you're hanging out with. And if they're no good, get out of there. Proverbs 12:15, the way of a fool is wise in his own eyes, but he who hears counsel is wise. Don't be afraid to listen to people. Sometimes it's hard. I'm guilty. But of that, Matthew 24:36, but of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven knows, but my Father only. Be ready. Matthew 24:42, watch therefore, for you don't know the hour the Lord is your coming. The Lord is coming. Matthew 24:43, but know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. He's perfect, trustable, timeless, and always watching. And he's already come in love, and he's come in love for you. And next time he's going to come in judgment. So be ready and be on the right side when he comes. And if you say Abraham trusted God and it was accounted to him for righteousness, but he never saw the result of what God's promises were. David made serious mistakes but was wise and learned from them, and God used him and the Israelites. God used him, and the Israelites were established by strength through David. Joseph, his life was unfair for much of his life, yet he was the establishing foundation of the Israelite people in their quantities. And Moses, I like Moses, if 40 years he was in Egypt, 40 years he was in the bush, and then God decided to use him. So never fear that God is ready to use you as long as you can give him the time. But then I think this one is a ripper. Pharaoh hardened his heart. God knew his heart. And perhaps there was a chance for Pharaoh until God finally realised that Pharaoh was going nowhere. Pharaoh was going to reject the Lord. And then he used him. And he used him to throw away his livestock, to throw away his chariots and his soldiers, to throw away his firstborn men, to throw away his rivers and his water supplies, to throw away all of his stocks. God will get everything done with you, whether you're saved or whether you're not. He's going to use you. You are allowed, as my brother-in-law would say, to do anything that you want to do. And while you're doing anything that you want to do, God will get everything that he wants to get done. So if you can strive to be a blessing for him, then when you're saved and it all ends, whether it be for you or when he returns, then you can be ready. So, 50 years this year for me. Looks like I'm going to have to stand up the front if I'm lucky enough. You could call it half gone, or you could call it half started. And I think it should be called half started. That's possibly better. And I'm willing to do whatever God brings, and hopefully can have a bit of fun on the way. And it's all big talkers' words, I guess, but I'm thankful that I'm forgiven, and I'll try and keep things straight with your help as well. And there's a few other last prayers, and that's the end. But Jabez called on the God of Israel, saying, "Oh, that you will bless me indeed and enlarge my territory." This is Chronicles 4, verse 10. "That your hand would be with me and that you would keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain." So God granted him what he had requested. There's a good senior fella that gave me that a long time ago, and I think it works. But I'm not saying that you need to be superstitious about a verse, but I don't think that you should be afraid to ask God to bless you in whatever circumstances that you're in. And then I guess there's 2 Chronicles 34 verse 2. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and followed the ways of his father, David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. And then Ecclesiastes 12 verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether it be good or evil. So I hope that's been a help, and I thank you for hearing my testimony. Proud to be a Christian. I'll just close in prayer, Lord, thanks for knowing you. Thanks that we can talk of you. Thanks that your word can be a guide for us. Thanks that no matter who we run into, we've got a story. Help us to make that story consistent. Help us to strive to tell people. Help us to be proud of your word. And thank you that your word is what does the work. And thank you that we can trust you and we can see in this world and all the happenings of it that you're doing your perfect will and your work. And help us to have a good afternoon. In the name of the Lord Jesus.